Hi, I'm Hannah Carter, a volunteer naturalist here at Bernheim, and we're here to continue our series on the bees. So this is part 2, and we're going to be talking a little bit about the things that we use for beekeeping, and we also have Kristen here to ask a few questions. She is not a beekeeper, so she's the perfect person to ask some questions that maybe you guys might have at home. So take it away.
The first thing I wanted to ask you is, how did you learn this very interesting, what would you call it, a profession, a vocation, a hobby?
Well, for me it's a hobby. For somebody else it might be a profession. But as far as how I learned really by doing. So in the last video I talked about how I had joined a club in college and then came here to volunteer, and the entire time I just learned by watching more experienced beekeepers around me and asking lots and lots of questions, which is my personal favorite thing to be doing at all times. So I think that's the best way to learn, is just to continue to be curious and ask questions. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be something you have to take a course on or read a lot of books about or anything like that. I haven't done really any of that. I've maybe read some books now at this point, but so yeah, I just learned by showing up and asking questions and being curious and being open, and I think that's the best way to learn, and doing it, yeah.
So talking a little more about how you learned, what were the toughest things for you to get your head around or to get used to doing?
So the most difficult things for me were less about like the information, because I think that's something that you can continuously learn, and you don't have to be at the hive even to really learn those things, like, you know, things like how you know the hive is healthy, how you know I guess how you know they're producing honey is kind of something that you can look at in person, but just different things like that, if there's brood or if there's not, and what times things are happening. So that's all stuff that you can sort of learn in your brain and not with your hands. But kind of the more difficult things for me were like the kinesthetic stuff. So having to, you know, when you're in a hive, there's probably like 10 or 12 of these in a box, and you're having to separate them and get them out so that you can see if they've made any honey. This is an old frame with some comb left in it. It's kind of chewed up, like I guess it's been probably harvested. So yeah, and so that was very difficult for me because I was afraid to do it too hard and hurt the bees or hurt the hive or something like that. But something I've learned along the way is that bees are really, really, really resilient, as most things are in nature. And even if you end up accidentally crushing or poking a hole in the hive, they repair it. They're very focused, they're doing their thing, and so they don't mind. And I was also afraid to crush the bees. That was a really big fear of mine because it does happen. And doing things like the mite count, if you are a beekeeper that treats for mites, not everybody does, then you do have to put them in a chemical solution, like about 100 of them, and it kills them. But something that puts it in perspective for me is that you're saving the rest of the hive by doing that, by counting the mites and seeing if you need to treat them. And there's like up to 50,000 bees in a hive at a time, so it's not, you know, 100 is chump change, I guess, but it is life, so it was sort of hard for me to wrap my head around more the moral questions than the actual information.
And so you seem to do this as a solitary activity a lot of the time, sometimes as part of the volunteer community here at Bernheim. But what if a family wanted to take this up? What would you tell the parents? Like, what kind of experience are you bringing to your children by taking on this new hobby?
I think a wonderful experience, because it's something that, it's a process. So it's something that you see from start to finish. You get to see a lot of evolutions, there's life cycles, there's so much to learn within that. You know, it's not just how to harvest honey. That's one piece of it, so it's a skill. And then you also learn values, I feel like, about life, and you learn about the life cycle, you learn about pollination. There's so much education there. And then it's also something that you can do as a family to bring you together outside in nature, connecting on a deeper level with a living thing that isn't a human being or like a domestic animal. And so I think that that's really something that's very rich, even if you can't do it at home, to just come to a place like this or volunteer and do it or get involved with some kind of program like that, I think is really amazing. And I think, you know, a tip that I could give is just to make sure you're being safe, because even though they they do sting, but they don't want to ever sting, you know, because if they sting, they die, and that's the end of their life. And so it's not very common. I've only ever been stung once in my entire life, and it was my fault. So I wasn't wearing gloves, and I accidentally smashed one. So and that's usually how it goes. You step on one or something like that. But do be cautious and make sure you're teaching your kids safety, using things like the smoker and things like the bees, and respecting the life that is there, and respecting their honey and stuff, because they made that for themselves and they have to eat it too. And so just being a good, responsible beekeeper and being cognizant of what the bees need, and not just reaping them of their honey and then kind of leaving them to die because they have to have it to winter over. So there are some things you're going to want to learn, but yeah, I think it's a great thing to invest your time into, and it's good for the environment and it's good for the soul. So.